Greetings, hello, and welcome. This is another video where I'm exploring the theme of the Garden of Eden as it continues to pervade through Scripture. And I'm sharing this because this is basically a theme that many people just aren't aware of. And yet, I do think there's good evidence that God's presence that was available in Eden has continued to resurface in a variety of ways throughout the narrative of Scripture because God's desire is to dwell in the midst of his people. And so Eden is not lost at the end of Genesis chapter 3. It is constantly in the process of being recapitulated and restored in a variety of ways. And so for today, I wanted to talk about how Eden is quite deliberately embodied in the tabernacle and the temple. What we'll be looking at today is a variety of descriptions of the tabernacle, which is just a traveling portable temple. And then you have the temple itself, which is a non traveling temple. It's a permanent temple. And we're going to see how the function of Eden, the layout of Eden, and the language used to describe Eden reappears in deliberate ways in the descriptions of the tabernacle and the temple, suggesting quite strongly that the tabernacle and the temple were intended deliberately as being recreations of what God had begun in the Garden of Eden. So let's begin. All right. Probably the least controversial thing I'll say today is that the tabernacle was intended as a microcosm of all creation. This is something that, if you do studies on the temple, this is something that a variety of biblical scholars will say. This is a fairly common way of talking about the function of what the tabernacle was to be. So here's an interesting passage in the Psalms, in Psalm 78, verse 69, where it says, "He built his sanctuary like the high heavens, like the earth, which was founded forever." So you'll notice here that the sanctuary was built to basically look like the heavens and the earth. The heavens and the earth. So the sanctuary is literally described here as a microcosm of all creation. Of course, all creation is really summarized as the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And another passage we could put up here is Isaiah 66, verse 1, where Yahweh says that heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool, and yet you're creating this temple where I'm going to rest and dwell. How is that even possible? Or some along those lines. The whole point there is that the temple is a way to at least ideally recreate the heavens and the earth, even though the temple really can't do that because it's just one small building compared to the vastness of all creation. So another thing that we could also look at is what seems to be a very deliberate threefold structure of Eden, of the tabernacle, and of all creation. And you could even throw in the tabernacle is basically recreated in the temple. So we could say Eden, the tabernacle slash temple, and then all creation. And what these different levels consist of would be an increasing level of closeness to the presence of God. So I'm actually going to go in reverse order. I'm going to talk about the very presence of God, and then the level outside of that, and then the level outside of that. And so when it comes to Eden, it's quite clear that we have a garden. It's actually called the garden that's in Eden. So the garden is that sacred place where the people are in fellowship with God. So you have the garden first, and the garden is actually in Eden. Eden is the larger region. And then naturally you have the land that's outside of Eden. So when Adam and Eve get kicked out of Eden, they are outside of it. Okay. They're no longer there in that area. So you have the threefold areas. And of course, inside the Garden of Eden is the tree, and where Adam and Eve are naturally walking in fellowship with God. When you get to the tabernacle and the temple, you have the same threefold structure that continues to start from the Holy of Holies, which is the place in which God and his presence actually dwell. You have outside of that, which is called the holy place. You can call it the temple proper or the tabernacle proper. And then you have the outer court. Okay. And obviously, there are various levels of ritual purity that you need to undergo in order to even move from the outer court to the holy place, and then from the holy place to the Holy of Holies. You can only do that if you are a very particular type of priest. Okay. But I think that this is actually a reflection of all creation. Okay. So if you take these three things, it seems that they reflect this structure, which is the closest part, which is the presence of God, which is naturally God's throne room. And God's throne room is in the midst of what we would call the visible heavens. But the thing is, you can look up in the sky, you can look at the clouds, and you can look at the stars. You can, during the daytime, you can see the blue sky, and yet you don't see God's throne room. God's throne room is kind of deeper into those heavens, and then you have outside of it, which is kind of the common area, the lobby, we might say, which is the inhabitable earth. Okay, so between Eden, the tabernacle slash temple, and all creation, we have this threefold structure that is deliberately built with increasing levels of closeness to God Himself. Okay, so again, this would suggest that the layout and the way that God had wanted the tabernacle and the temple to be built is to resemble Eden, which itself is resembling the structure of creation. The whole point there is to get as close as possible to the presence of God. Okay, that's what we're getting at. Okay, so let's look at the closest part, the Holy of Holies, which again I think is referencing God's throne room, because in the Holy of Holies, it was understood that the very presence of God, the very glory of God, was present there, and that's where God lived. And so if God was there, God was ruling from there. That is God's throne room. So there are a variety of ways in which this language is going to connect Eden with the tabernacle and the temple. One of which is that the cherubim, which is the plural of cherub, so we could say cherubs in English, the cherubim in Hebrew, their function is that they basically guard the most holy place. Well, how do we know this? Well, let's look at this. So in the creation of the tabernacle, Yahweh said, "You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, make them of hammered work at the 2 ends of the mercy seat." Now, I think a lot of people know that this is just a important piece of furniture that's actually there within the tabernacle and the temple. But I don't think people have stopped to ask the question, why is it cherubim? Why could it not just be regular angels? Why is it not, a rabbit or an elephant? Why this particular thing? People haven't stopped to ask that question. Well, that's because the cherubim are typically there within the presence of God. And here's another passage, or at least a couple passages, that actually make this point quite explicitly. Exodus 26, verse 1. "Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twisted linen and blue and purple and scarlet material. You shall make them with cherubim, the work of a skillful workman." Okay, so they're making this curtain that is basically, the portrayal of these angels. And then the passage goes on in verse 31, "You shall make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet material and fine twisted linen. It shall be made with cherubim." Okay, so it's to portray these cherubim. "The work of a skillful workman. You shall hang it on the 4 pillars of acacia overlaid with gold, their hooks also being of gold, 4 sockets of silver. You shall hang up the veil. Under the clasp you shall bring the ark of the testimony there within the veil. And the veil," here's the key thing. Why are they making this veil? "The veil shall serve for you as a partition between the holy place and the Holy of Holies." Okay? So they're making this veil, this curtain, 10 curtains actually, and they are portrayed with the cherubim. And their function is to divide the Holy of Holies from the holy place. Okay? And naturally, this is going to recall the last verse in Genesis chapter 3, where Yahweh drove out the man at the east of the Garden of Eden, and he placed the cherubim and the flaming sword. He turned every way. Why? Why did he put them there? To guard the way to the tree of life. The tree of life, of course, was in the garden itself. And so the cherubim, again, are guarding that presence to the closest part, to the Holy of Holies, to the garden itself. Okay? So it's interesting that we have this portrayal of Eden, And then we have it being recreated in a very deliberate way in the tabernacle and in the temple in a way to kind of divide the Holy of Holies from the outer room, which is the holy place. That often gets overlooked, but I think that's an intentional way of showing how Eden is deliberately being embodied in the tabernacle and the temple. Okay, let's move to the second level, the holy place. Okay, and I'm just going to use this to describe the visible heavens. Okay, and in the holy place, we're going to have three different pieces of furniture that I think are intentional at portraying the presence of God. The first one we're going to look at is the lampstand. Okay. Now, when you look at the description of the lampstand, you basically have two pieces of data that can come to mind that describe this lampstand. Okay. Number one, the lampstand naturally is going to provide light. That seems kind of obvious and self evident. But number two, the lampstand deliberately looks like a tree. It's a menorah. That's the Hebrew word for the lampstand. It just kind of comes out like this. It's just the menorah. And if you've seen menorahs, I mean, we're coming into the month of December to where we're going to have Hanukkah and people are going to have their menorahs out. And it obviously looks like a tree. Okay, so you've got this piece of furniture that provides light. That's its purpose. And it looks like a tree. Remember, they didn't have electricity, so they needed this. Okay, well, again, why would you have a tree there? Okay, well, here's something that's interesting. The lampstand's light draws specifically on the lights that are actually in the heavens. Okay, there's a particular word for light. There are a variety of words in Hebrew, but this particular word is the word or in Hebrew. That's a noun, the noun or. Okay, and it appears 5 times in these verses in Genesis. Then God said, "Let there be light," Hebrew or, and there was light. There it is again. God saw the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day. Darkness he called night. Evening and morning, day one, or one day. Okay. So there we have this noun for light, or that clearly is the lights that are up there in the heavens. It's good. Okay. And obviously the light contrasts the darkness that is night. Okay. But the same word for light appears in the description of the lampstands. And in Exodus 25, verse 37, "You shall make its lamps 7 in number, and they shall mount on lamps so as to shed light," there's that Hebrew noun or, "in the space in front of it." Okay? So the description of the lampstands is drawing deliberately on language of light that was there in creation. Creation, of course, that led to the creation of the Garden of Eden. Okay. But the light there, of course, the lights that you actually see there in the heavens. As you look up, you see that. Okay. All right. So that's an interesting connection there. And then the imagery of the lampstands function as churches quite deliberately in the book of Revelation, Revelation 1:20. The 7 stars are the 7 angels of the 7 churches. Okay, so you have stars related to the angels of the churches, and the lampstands are the 7 churches. Okay, so you've got stars and churches that are closely related. Okay, sorry, stars and lampstands that are closely related. No surprise there. If we're familiar with Genesis and we're familiar with the function of the menorah, then this should not be a surprise. Again, Revelation is drawing on a wide pool of images there. So, of course, I also mentioned that the lampstands, they look like a tree. And what is the tree that's there naturally in the story of the early chapters of Genesis? That's the tree of life. The tree of life. Okay. And so Revelation is going to pick up on this and use it quite explicitly. There are other places we can look at, but I think Revelation is where we can see most of it. Revelation 1:20, of course, we've seen the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches, which indicate that the churches have a light-giving function. They have a function of being faithful witnesses. They are to be the light to the world. They are to be preachers of the gospel. Okay. In fact, in Revelation chapter 11, we have the vision of the 2 witnesses, and they're described as lampstands. These 2 witnesses that are preaching the gospel are described as lampstands. Okay. So lampstands not only draw upon the temple imagery, but also the light giving imagery, and they naturally appear as a tree. Okay. Of course, the tree of life appears in Revelation 2:7. The one who overcomes, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. So again, we have the connection there of the tree of life, the paradise of God, and this is directed to a church. It's a promise given to a church that is explicitly called a lampstand. So you got lampstand, tree of life, paradise of God. Again, you have the connection of the tabernacle, temple imagery with the Garden of Eden all there together in one nice little present. And then we have the function of the tree of life, which is bringing restoration to the world, which I think is one of the missions of the church. Show me this in Revelation 22. Show me the river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of God and of the Lamb, okay, in the middle of the street. On either side of the river was the tree of life. What does it do? It bears 12 kinds of fruit every month. The leaves of the tree had a particular purpose. It's for bringing healing to the nations, okay? This tree of life, which is in the paradise of God, that is one of the promises that's offered to faithful, overcoming Christians that are fulfilling their light-giving witness to the world. They are going to contribute to bringing healing to the nations, okay? And if you don't think that's a responsibility of the church in the here and now, you need to go read the Gospels and read the parables of Jesus more carefully. We can have a discussion on Revelation 22 if we want to. But I think you can make a good argument that because this is a description of the New Jerusalem that is presently coming down out of heaven, we should consider how the function of the church is to bring healing to the nations in the here and now. Okay, so there you go. You have the lampstand functioning as a light-giving purpose, drawing on Eden, and then it also has the resemblance of a tree, naturally the tree of life, which also is drawing on Eden as well. Okay, all right. What else is present in the second level of holy place? Well, we have the table of bread. And the table of bread was a particular table that naturally had bread. Only certain people can eat of it. It was the priests that were supposed to eat of it, although David had this exception where he was able to eat of it, and Jesus comments on this in Mark chapter 2, I believe. But it seems that the purpose of the bread was to bring people in fellowship with God. Fellowship with God. Okay. Which naturally was what Eden was doing. So in Leviticus 24, we have the description of this, starting in verse 5. You shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes with it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each cake. You shall set them in 2 rows, 6 to a row, on a pure gold table before the Lord. Before the Lord means in the presence of the Lord. Okay, in the presence of Yahweh. Not just kind of before him, but it's like in his presence, okay? You shall put pure frankincense on each row, that it may be a memorial portion for the bread, even an offering by fire to Yahweh every Sabbath day. He shall set it in order before the Lord continually. That is, in the presence of Yahweh continually, as an everlasting covenant for the sons of Israel. It shall be for Aaron and his sons, that they shall eat it where? In the holy place. That's where this table is. It's located in the holy place, not in the Holy of Holies. It's not in the outer court. It's here in the holy place. And while they're there, they are eating in the presence of Yahweh. They're eating in the presence of God because in the room right next to it, we have the Holy of Holies. Okay. So naturally, that is drawing on the Eden language to where Eden, you had fellowship with God. Naturally, there was plenty of trees there providing food for the people of God, for Adam and Eve, for humanity. But we're seeing the theme here of the presence of God in this second level. Okay. Third piece of furniture is the golden altar. Okay. And the golden altar also represents the presence of God because the golden altar is where the incense is burned, and the incense is regularly described as the prayers of the saints, which naturally the incense goes up to God and represents the prayers of the saints. So our prayers go up into the presence of God. So in Psalm 141, verse 2, the psalmist says, "May my prayer be counted as incense before you." Okay, so he's likening the incense that comes from the golden altar in the holy place to his own prayers. And the book of Revelation picks this up in a couple of passages. Revelation 5, verse 8. 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each one holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense. But what are these golden bowls? What is this incense? They are the prayers of the saints. It says that in Revelation chapter 5, verse 8, and it also repeats it in Revelation chapter 8, verse 4. Okay, so the incense from the golden altar, which is a piece of furniture in the second level. It's not the Holy of Holies, it's the holy place. It's not the outer court. In the holy place, we have these three pieces of furniture. We have the table with the bread, we have the lampstands, the menorah, and we have the golden altar. And they each, in their own way, are signifying the presence of God. Okay, then we have the outer court, okay, which suggests the inhabitable earth. You know, everyone can come into the outer court. Everyone lives in the inhabitable earth. We get that, okay? All right. Now, in the outer court, there was an altar, okay? And this altar that was present, it wasn't made from a bunch of special materials. It wasn't made from gold or acacia wood, silver. It wasn't made from dolphin skin. It wasn't like super special. It was literally made from the earth. Literally made from the earth. Okay. And I think that's really interesting because this own altar is representing the earth itself, the land itself. And a lot of the language that's used to describe this altar is connecting it in solidarity with the earth, not with heaven, not with the throne room, but with the earth. Okay, this third level in our tripartite structure of creation. So in Exodus 20, verse 24, you shall make an altar of earth, okay, of Adamah, literally in Hebrew, okay. That's an altar of the ground, you could translate it, for me. Shall sacrifice your burnt offerings, peace offerings, sheep and oxen in every place I cause my name to be remembered. I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stone for me, here's just another way of describing it. Okay, this is just the word eben in Hebrew, the word stone. Okay, so you got the ground, you've got the earth, you've got the stone, and he's like, don't build it from cut stones. If you do it, if you wield a tool on it, you're going to profane it. Okay, you know, it needs to be from the earth. It needs to be from the ground because this altar in this third level of the outer court represents the inhabitable earth. Okay. All right. And then in Ezekiel's description, prophetic description of the restored temple, because from the perspective of Ezekiel, that the priestly prophet, the first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians in the 6th century. And so in his vision of the restored temple, it says, these are the measurements of the altar by cubits. In the next verse, it says, from the base on the ground to the lower ledge shall be 2 cubits. But literally in the Hebrew, it says from the bosom of the earth. But no translation translates it that way because that's almost too literal. Okay. So they translate it as the base on the ground, but it's literally the bosom of the earth. Okay. So you have the first altar made from the earth and from stone, and you have the restored altar made from the bosom of the earth, from the ground itself. Okay, so there's this solidarity between the outer court and the inhabitable earth in a real, tangible way. And again, we read over these passages and we just don't connect them. We don't think about them. We don't think about what significance that might be. Because I know whenever you're reading over the descriptions of the tabernacle and temple, you think, okay, yeah, I'm a Christian. This doesn't have a lot of relevance for me. And so you just kind of read over it very quickly. You don't stop and dwell on it. I get it. I understand. I mean, I've done the same thing. So, but I'm bringing this to you now. Not only do we have the earth, but we also have the sea. In fact, the wash basin, okay, which the priest used for their own ritualistic cleansing, is literally called the sea. Hayam in Hebrew, the sea. It's just called the sea. And in fact, most translations just flat out translate it as the sea. Okay, so you've got the earth and the sea. Well, what passage is this? 1 Kings 7, verse 23. It says, now he made the sea, right there, which is called the sea, of cast metal 10 cubits from brim to brim, circular in form, and its height was 5 cubits. But what the passage is talking about is the wash basin used for ritual cleansing by the temple priest. But he just calls it the sea, using the normal Hebrew word for sea, not just a sea, the sea. Okay, so we have the altar and the wash basin are likened unto the earth and the sea. Again, we have this description that is just recalling the inhabitable earth. And the language is just used there. Again, we read over it. We don't think much of it, but I think there's something deliberate that's going on here. Okay. If that didn't convince you, I think this will. Okay. The description of God finishing creation is going to be reused in Exodus to describe the finishing of the tabernacle. So let's look at this. Okay, so Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Okay, but in finishing the tabernacle, and Moses saw all the work, and behold, they had made it. Okay, and so we have three same Hebrew words here. We have the verb to see, we have the word all, and then we have the verb to make. Okay, I don't think that's an accident. If you're reading that in Hebrew, you're going to say, okay, yeah, I'm familiar with the language there in Genesis if you're reading it there in Exodus. Okay, here's another one. The very next verse in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, then the heavens and the earth were finished. Okay, but a few verses earlier in Exodus 39, all the work of the tabernacle and the tent of the meeting was finished, using the same Hebrew verb. I got another one for you. Next verse in Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. And on the seventh day, God finished his work. Okay, you got the verb and you have the noun. Okay, and Moses finished the work in Exodus 40, verse 33. The verb and the noun. Okay, so you got all these passages there, like right there at the end, at the conclusion of the tabernacle in Exodus 39 and 40, that seem to be drawing quite deliberately from Genesis chapter 1, 31, 2 verse 1 and 2 verse 2. Okay? Again, showing that the tabernacle is deliberately drawing on creation itself. So hopefully you found this interesting and convincing. This is the purpose, again, of all this, to show that the Garden of Eden has not been cast off. God has been trying to recreate and embody Eden in his temple presence, the tabernacle and the temple. And if you don't think that the church, which is the new temple, the true temple of God, is embodying Eden in some interesting ways, well, just wait for some forthcoming videos, because I'm going to show you a lot of evidence for it. One in particular, just kind of a teaser here. Why is it that Paul says in regard to the church, the temple, in 1 Corinthians, which he says a couple places in 1 Corinthians, that the church is the temple of God because the Holy Spirit is there. He says, I planted and Apollos watered. Why is he using planting and watering? Why is he using this language that you would use to describe a garden to describe the church, namely the temple? I wonder why that is. It's because Eden is being embodied in the new temple, which is the people of God. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, fave, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for more videos. Appreciate you all. Have a good day.